Angawar, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, cool. Very well.
Happy
Can
to
you
hear
hear
that.
me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I have a few questions. First one is kind of theory. So, do you think that 9.2 might have been first one to be some sort of afterlife for rulers? Because we are missing lots of characters, but notably there aren't, for example, fathers of the characters in Shadowlands.
Yeah.
And all of them have the same characteristic of having ruled some land. So that is the first question that I have.
Okay, wait, can you just repeat? Because I heard the last bit of your question, but the first bit, do I think I didn't hear that bit.
Do you think that 9.1 might have been planned to be afterlife for rulers, like leaders?
So, just purely looking at who we meet in the Shadowlands isn't necessarily a good way of judging the Shadowlands, since Blizzard have already made it clear that they chose very carefully who they show in the Shadowlands. They didn't want to just do it like a who's who of, everyone we've lost in the past. So I wouldn't look too much at that. As for what I think the Shadowlands was meant to be in terms of bringing back all of these, I think most of the characters that they sort of quote-unquote brought back was meant to create hype. It was meant to, and Blizzard does this quite often, which really fucking annoys the living shit out of me. They seem to build so much of their story as well as their game around artificial hype, trying to really drum up whatever hype they can get from the game. And it's sort of like, why don't you just allow the game itself to become the hype that keeps people going, that keeps us playing the game, right? So that sort of is extremely annoying to me whenever Blizzard jumps into that. As for what the Shadowlands is, we were actually discussing this last night during the Lovecraft episode for patrons and YouTube members, like the Lovecraft podcast, where we sort of speculated and sort of brainstormed around everything we misunderstand about the about the Shadowlands in general. And I'm not going to give you guys the full speculation theory because that will probably be a video one day. But Joe, what do you mean the video stopped? Where did the video stop? Anyways, back to what I was saying. It seems to me that the whole Shadowlands was built to keep Ardenweald going, as if Ardenweald is the single most important place in the Shadowlands and everything else in the Shadowlands simply serves to keep Ardenweald going. So where the speculation theory sort of comes from is the Shadowlands actually the realms of death? And to my mind, the answer to that is no. The Shadowlands is obviously not the realms of death. The Shadowlands is the realms of life as it subjugated death. So death is somewhere. Zuval gives us this answer when Zuval tells us they will learn you cannot chain death. He wasn't referring to himself, he was referring to the actual death. And how life had chained death. Because look at Ardenweald. What does Ardenweald do? It takes creatures of life, rebirths them back into the cycle of the Great Beyond. So the creatures of life never actually die. They just continuously come back to life. All of the gods, the demigods, the lower, none of them ever die. That's the job of Ardenweald. Now look at the other realms that we know of within the Shadowlands. Bastion. Bastion serves to bring souls from the Great Beyond into the Shadowlands to fuel Ardenweald. Maldraxxus, the Necrolords, literally the army meant to defend the Shadowlands, i.e. defend Ardenweald. Revendreth, literally the place where souls are tapped for their anima, so that anima can be sent to Ardenweald. The Winter Queen tells us it's been so long since we've last had any anima delivered from Revendreth. None of the other realms tells us that they get their anima from Revendreth, but Ardenweald does get its anima from Revendreth itself. None of the souls are ever meant to go to the mall. This is also confirmed within the lore. The Maw did not exist at the offset of this creation. The Maw was basically just a place to keep Zuvol. So it seems to me that the existence of the Shadowlands very much serves Ardenweald's purposes. And this thing sort of gets even worse as soon as you start thinking about Tyrande and the Tear of Elune that looks very much like an acorn or a seed of some kind. And what do seeds do? What happens with seeds? What is about to happen with that seed that Tyrande is now bringing back to Azeroth? There's some weird shit, to say the least, behind that speculation theory that I'll probably dive into in a video at some point. But anyways, did that answer your first question, Angular?
Yeah, pretty much.
What's your second question? You did say you had multiple questions.
Yeah. What Warlock talents would you like to return in Dragonfight, if any?
Sorry, what do I want?
What Warlock talents would you like to return?
Warlock talents. Dude, it's not so much about talents for me when it comes to Warlock.
Or spells in general.
It's, again, I think Warlock has all of the spells that it requires. One thing I would like to see back is the ability to consume souls that we had in Legion from our artifact weapon. That was such a cool mechanic to play around. So I would not mind getting that back because I've sort of missed that. Because again, that was one of those mechanics that if you were a great Warlock, it showed, right? Because you were using your souls correctly versus if you were a shit Warlock, it would also show because you didn't understand when you were supposed to absorb the souls. So that's something that I would love back. But most importantly, the thing that I want from Warlocks, which I'm not sure I'm ever actually going to get thanks to how the game is built right now. But if I could have my wish list, if I could speak to Brian Alinka and sort of get the Warlock that I want to go back to the early days of Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm, even to some extent Mists of Pandaria, where Warlocks, specifically Affliction Warlocks, were all about slow damage over time. They weren't bursty. It's not really what they were designed to be. Their whole thing was the longer a fight goes on, the more powerful they get. And if a fight goes more than 5, 6, 7 minutes, the Affliction Warlock almost always ends up on top. Because they're just very powerful the longer a fight goes on. That more calculated, methodical playstyle. Right now in Final Fantasy, for example, I'm playing a Black Mage. The reason I play Black Mage is it reminds me so much of the original Warlock playing, right? Or playstyle, which is more about thinking ahead, thinking about what comes next and then what comes after that, and being sure to plan for all of those things in advance, because it wasn't about clicking your buttons fast. You know, it was like your buttons were, sure, it was there and you just had to click them. And also your dots would last anywhere from 12 to 18 seconds, so it wasn't like a spam class by any means. But knowing when certain buttons had to be pressed, knowing when certain dots needed to be refreshed, making decisions between, do I refresh now or do I keep draining? Do I finish this cast or do I refresh? Do I move now and cast later, or cast now and potentially risk getting hit by something? Do I have the cooldowns to get hit by something right now, or should I wait? That sort of playstyle where it's far more strategic, that's what I would want back. It's not so much about individual talents that I want to see, but if you're going to push me for a talent, Soul Swap is another one that I would love to get back. I miss Soul Swap. I do. Because especially Empowered Soul Swap, where you could actually refresh the dots for their full power. That was so OP as an Affliction Warlock. I'm trying to think. As a Destruction Warlock, I never really cared much for Destruction, so I wouldn't mind if they just removed it from the game, in all honesty, because it feels a bit like a Fire Mage, but it's not a Fire Mage. For Demonology, I guess I'm going to say the same thing I've always said, which is Demon Form. It feels like Demonology is broken without Demon Form. So that's probably what I would love to see. But yeah, what would you like to get back?
I actually didn't play very far into back, so I don't know what most. I remember Demon Form 2, but I didn't play Affliction or Destruction at all. So.
Oh, all right. So you're just excited to see whatever the fuck they bring.
Yeah, and also I watch I sometimes look at Kalamazi, and he did wish list for it. So I wanted to see yours or hear yours.
I mean, I haven't made Warlock videos in such a long time that my wish list would be so short. I just want good Warlock. I guess it's sort of all I've always really cared more about the philosophy behind classes than I actually care about the individual design aspect of the class. So my wish list would almost always be more philosophical. So the fantasy of the class, does the playstyle of the class actually fit the fantasy of the class, or doesn't it? So those are things that I'm far more interested in. The best example I sort of have of this is Arms Warrior. To my mind, one of the most mismatched fantasy to actual gameplay in the game. Arms Warrior is said to be the more tactical, strategic warrior. It's like, well, where in the playstyle is it supposed to be tactical, strategic? Like, its playstyle does not scream that. So either you just made up a bunch of words that you thought sounded good and fucking slapped it onto the spec, or you fucked up the build of this. Like, the spec itself is fucked because it doesn't feel like that tactical or tactics heavy sort of spec. So that sort of things that I would far more gripe with, if that makes sense, than individual talents and sort of spells and stuff like that. So yeah, Angwar, I really hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you so much for the question, man.
And I have the last one, but
go for it.
Do you think Illidan will return next expansion?
Yes. There's no way you have a Dragonflight expansion without Titans. There's no way you have Titans without Illidan. So yeah, I can see Illidan making a return. Maybe at the end of Dragonflight is when we'll finally see the Titans. It would be weird if there's an entire Dragon expansion, specifically after the Shadowlands expansion, where one would have thought the Titans may make an appearance. Now you go to the Dragon Isles, which is literally creations of the Titans in their purest form, and somehow they don't matter. Like, the Titans still don't show up. So something has to happen. Something has to give. So yeah, I can absolutely see Blizzard deciding to bring Illidan back at the either middle of the expansion or at the end. I doubt beginning. So probably another year and a half before we'll see Illidan. All right, is that your last question, Angor?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you so much for the questions, dude. Really appreciate it.